But the thing I want to emphasize is that each one of these entities is a life of its own and an entity in its own right, so that we find ourselves as collections of entities. And these entities, because they're at the mental level, all exchange information, which is to say they have causal effects on each other telepathically. Now, what's an example of this telepathic communication? Let's look at the I consciousness. I want to suggest to you that our I is its own conscious being. And one way to experience the autonomy of the I consciousness is to tell yourself not to blink. Let's just try that, right? I want you all to open your eyes and not blink for as long as you can, right? At some point, you can't do it, right? Because the I consciousness says, no, that's it, right? So the I consciousness is willing to accept a certain level of direction, but beyond a certain point, it rebels. Now, you're seeing me, and you're seeing the room. We're all seeing what's going on. And we all know from our scientific studies that the operation of seeing is extremely complex, right? We know that we have all these rods and cones in our eyes, and they see different colors, and then it goes through our nervous system, and somehow or other, we compose a picture of the world. Now, even if we reject the rod and cone theory, still we know that as we look around the world, as we perceive the world, it's already chunked, right? So I'm looking out and seeing people and chairs and lights, right? I didn't do that chunking. I didn't analyze the raw data of sensation into a picture of a world already sorted out in various categorized ways. Something did that. Some intelligence assembled a coherent image of the world. And then I get the whole picture telepathically from that consciousness. That makes sense to think of it that way? Now, of course, the I consciousness is actually in telepathic contact with all the other senses and with the various organs and their moods and with these autonomous idiot savant consciousnesses. They all conspire, they all communicate with each other in creating this visual impression, which is then telepathically communicated to me. And I, of course, then in turn communicate telepathically to my I consciousness and tell it where to look or suggest certain categories of things that I'm looking for. So there's a whole telepathic communion that's going on among our sense consciousness, our organ consciousnesses, our idiot savant consciousness. And in fact, although it would be too complicated to draw it, these other subpersonalities often have direct access to the sense consciousnesses and to the motor. I didn't even put the motor consciousnesses up here, right? There's also the motor consciousness. And so sometimes, let's say we have the motor consciousnesses over here, and sometimes one of these other subpersonalities will send a message to my voice box, and I'll say something that I didn't want to say. Right? We call these Freudian slips. Right? So I'm trying to give you a feeling for the human body and the human self as a telepathically interacting set of relatively autonomous intelligences. This has huge implications for psychology, of course, right, to think of it this way. And then each one of these sense consciousnesses, let's say, is embodied in various tissues and various cells and so forth at the vital level. And then these, in terms, are embodied in systems of macromolecules. And there's this telepathic and empathic communication going all the way up and all the way down. Right? So this is a whole different way of experiencing what it means to be human. Because we have this idea scientifically that from here down, or from some mythical interior of my head down, it's all dead, basically. And so somehow all these automatic functions happen up to my brain, and then there's some sort of like miracle in which my brain electrical activity is translated into an experience all at once, which is a fairly incoherent picture. And what I'm suggesting is that we are living and intelligent all the way up and all the way down. Now, we have to reconcile this with physiology, right? So for example, we know that every rod and cone or whatever they are, the nerve endings in the eyeball, picks up something specific, like a certain color or a certain shape or a certain edge. This has been established by physiology. Okay, let's say that's true. It makes sense. But still, somehow or other, these little impressions, like a little impression of red or a little impression of straightness or whatever it is, they have to be integrated into a whole picture of the world. How is that possible? How is the information contained? If my perception of the world around me is reduced to nothing but electrical impulses, and if those electrical impulses are all that is transmitted through my nervous system, I don't see how it's possible to reassemble the world from those nervous impulses. It's a Humpty Dumpty problem. But let's look at it in terms of this new metaphysics. Let's say that each nervous ending in my eyeball is an actual occasion, is organized by an actual occasion. And each actual occasion in my eyeball takes in the whole universe, because every actual occasion takes in the whole universe. But because the interests of that actual occasion organizing a cell in my eyeball are very narrow, let's say because all it cares about is color or shape, it abstracts out of its perception of the world that color or that shape and highlights it. So that the function of the nerve cells is abstraction. And what the nerve cells pass on is not an electrical impulse. What they pass on is an experience of the whole world in which that color is highlighted. And another cell then passes on an experience of the whole world in which this shape is highlighted. And then the cells that are further along in the process, they take in two pictures of the whole world, one of which highlights the color and one of which highlights the shape. But because they're both perceptions of the whole world, they can be coordinated and added to each other. And so what is transmitted through the nervous system is not electrical impulses, it's experiences. The electrical impulse that goes through the nervous system is an abstraction from what's really happening. Carried along with that electrical impulse is a flow of feeling, an empathic and telepathic transmission of experience, which is then built up as it travels through the body, all these different experiences, each of which is an experience of the whole world, highlighting some different abstraction from it, can be assembled into a picture which is then synthesized by my sixth consciousness and then transmitted telepathically to my dominant personality. This is making sense. It's a very different understanding of physiology. And the whole mind-body problem is completely transformed by this. Right? It makes it clear that this is not a computational model. Right? We're not talking about mathematical computations going on here. We're talking about the transmission of experience. In fact, all energy in this way of seeing is the transmission of experience from actual occasion to actual occasion. Right? And again, if we can trace the electrical energy going through the nervous system, but that's simply a physical accompaniment to the transmission of experience. The kind of transmission of experience which allows us to have continuity with our own past, the way the person I was a moment ago is telepathically and empathically flowing into the person I am now. That's the way the experiences of the world are transmitted through my body up to my dominant consciousness. Now, this is also very simplified because you can imagine, let's say we had two of these next to each other, two different human beings. Right? Now, ordinarily, as I said last time, we would imagine that I think something and it comes down through here, and then it comes across the air and back up to the other person. But in fact, there are causal interactions that are going laterally across on every level. Right? So our macromolecules are affecting each other. The vibration of my vocal cords is affecting your eardrums. That's happening. But at the same time, you are feeling my body. Your organs are feeling my organs. Right? If I had a bellyache, some of you might get it, right? Because our organs are in direct communication with each other, and also all of our subpersonalities are carrying on these elaborate interactions. Now, it's not so much right now because the situation we're in is very abstract, right? We're in a situation where I'm the teacher and you're students and things are sort of settled, and so I'm sort of talking self to self with you. But when you're talking to your wife or your husband, it's very different, right? Like my little boy can have fights with Julianne's father, right? All these weird things can happen. We all know this goes on. And so we have to be willing to work with a much more complex understanding of our interactions with each other and of the interactions that are going on within our own bodies. Right? So our bodies, in a certain sense, everything but this, all of this, is the personal unconscious. Our bodies are our personal unconscious. That makes sense? Right? Okay, so now what this allows us to do is it allows us to understand what we mean when we say get into your body. People are often saying you've got to be in your body and not in your head. And for many years, I found that totally bewildering because I was thinking, well, the body is just the macromolecules. Why would I want to go there? But now I've come to realize that what my body is, it's an ocean of intelligence. And it's the ocean of intelligence, I sort of ride on it, right? But it's this ocean of intelligence which is my unconscious. And the more I can settle into that, the more I can communicate at all these various levels, the more I can bring my intelligence into effective presence in my body.